Please welcome President and CEO, Intouch Insight, Cameron Watt.
Thank you. Well, that was an entertaining look at fuel and oil, which was great. I checked with Steve backstage, and it turns out that the Holtzes mainly drive to Wally World, if you were wondering the answer to that. As he stated, I'm Cameron Watt. I'm the president and CEO of Intouch Insight. We are a customer experience measurement company. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about reducing retail friction, but how you need to look at that maybe from a measurement and operational standards monitoring standpoint. Last night we saw Donna, or heard Donna, talk about how the world is changing, how the retail environment is changing, and how there's greater change coming, some of which sounded very exciting and some of which sounded very scary. And depending on which end you sit on, I think there's probably a little bit of both. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to update you on some study results that we did around some of the new retailing areas that have been coming out where we can start to track data. And then, of course, I'm going to give out the Intouch CSP award. Reducing retail friction. Let's talk about that very briefly. The concept of retail friction, of course, being making it smoother for our customers to come through, additional ways for them to interact with us. It doesn't just mean it's easier. It might mean it's easier, it might mean it's faster, but generally it means for that consumer it's better and it's the way they want to interact with you. We all know experiences are evolving, right? We now buy things through our phone, including groceries, right? We talk to computers. Sometimes we don't even know we're doing it, because those chat bots that you're talking to are typically computers on those pop-up windows. But we know we're talking to computers in our homes because we actually talk to the computers in our homes. We can order things from our car, right? The experiences are changing. Amazon has now become a verb, right? Many people are worried about being Amazoned, right? Which is another way of saying irrelevant, right? No longer required. Basically out of business, right? We all know Amazon is already testing stores that don't have any front employees. They're completely, they call them peopleless, but I'm wondering who's stocking those shelves. But there are experiences, such as taking a vacation, where people are still going to go and do it. Yes, people say to me, what about virtual reality? I think in my lifetime, at least, people are still going to want to see some things themselves. You've also got the concept of going for a meal with friends and looking across the table. There's certain things you're still going to want to experience. You've got unique experiences out there. This is Giraffe Manor from Africa, where if you're not there, you're not going to get the experience. And then you've got more basic things like shopping malls. Sure, there are old and tired malls that we're all familiar with, right, where nobody goes anymore. But there's lots of vibrant malls. There's lots of new malls, renovated malls, and there's lots of people in those malls. And then we've got the gas pump. If you asked me 20 years ago, if you said, what do you think about grocery as a bulletproof concept? The answer would be, well, people are going to have to buy food, right? Of course. So of course, grocery stores are going to be necessary and they're going to be vibrant because people have to buy food and the population's growing, therefore the need for food is growing. The truth, though, is you can not only buy your food on your phone, have it delivered, or do curbside pickup, but now there's companies, and they have figured out that you can take all the ingredients that are in a grocery store, you can add a recipe to it, put it in a box, deliver it to somebody as a meal kit. I can order 5 meal kits, and now I've got my week covered, right? And yeah, I've done that. What's interesting for me is it's not the grocery stores that figured out, hey, we've got all this stuff. I wonder if there's another way for us to put a value-added layer on it and go out there and get some more money and keep our market share. It was third parties that did it. And right now in the fuel space, there are companies that will deliver gasoline to your home or to your office. Put it in your car for you. You don't have to go to the gas station to get gas, right? I don't think there's a lot of fuel companies doing that, but there are companies doing that. And that's market share is going to change. Experiences are going to shift. How you interact with your consumers are going to change. However, 85% of global retail sales are still done in physical locations, right? So people are still purchasing out there. 63% of them, however, actually use their phones or tablets or mobile devices in order to engage when they're doing the shopping experience. Personally, a couple months ago, I was going to go on a trip and I had some time and I wanted to buy a new camera. So I went to a big box store because I didn't know what kind of camera I wanted to buy. So I went and I shopped and I looked at all the makes and the models and I found one that I liked. You know, it was the right size, price wasn't too bad, it was what I wanted. It was $220. So, you know, 20 years ago, I'd have picked the phone up and walked to the cash and bought it. But no, I pulled out my phone and I Googled it to see how much the phone cost somewhere else, right? Was I missing out on any big deals? Was there something going on? Are there coupons? And I found the phone. It was about $20 cheaper if I bought it online. But $20 wasn't enough for me at that time to wait and have to order it and go through the hassle. So I picked up the phone and I walked out and paid for it. But if that was $50 or $100, I likely would have left that store and ordered it online from another retailer. People use their phones as part of their day-to-day experience in locations. In Petro Convenience, they're using them today for loyalty programs, to check for coupons, right? They're using them to turn on and off the pumps. They can use them now to scan product and pay for product and let the people in the store know they're not shoplifting, right? And there's lots more applications coming for technology inside the Petro Convenience space. So we have to know that it's coming. We have to know the change is coming, and we have to realize that our consumers are going to act differently in the future than they act today. Today, whether or not our cashier is courteous, providing, you know, greetings and friendly parting remarks and expressing sincere thank yous, those things are all important today. Is it going to be important to all your consumers in the future? Maybe not. So what is going to be important? And are you measuring what's important, right? You need to be prepared to keep up with the retail changes, right, in the frictionless environment. Because you need to be prepared to ensure that you're delivering a consistent brand promise, regardless of how I, as a consumer, decide that I want to interact with you as a brand. Today, a lot of people collect customer surveys, right? It's very common, customer satisfaction surveys. Not everyone, but everyone gets social media today. Because whether you want to get it or not is a different question. But you get it, right? Your locations get it. And lots of us also have a call center for a way for people to reach us. So we're getting customer feedback today. But there are some customer feedback truths that we need to be aware of, right? One of which is the information you get only tells you how your customers feel about their experience, right? There's also very low survey response rates. When you do your surveys, you're not getting to 90% or 80% or even 50% of your customer base. And you're usually not getting that person who walked in to experience your brand for the first time, made an opinion and walked out, right? Because typically, survey results are skewed by a few things. They're skewed by the fact that you give away prizes most often to incent people to fill them in, or the response rates are even lower, right? And people who get incented to do something tend to give higher scores, and they tend to get to your loyalty members. You get the high and the low, right? You get the people who are really, really happy. We call them unicorns, and they want to tell you about it. Or the people who are really unhappy, and they want to tell you about it. That, by the way, is the reason in and of itself to have a proper survey program, is that you want a place that your customers can go to complain and to vent that is not their million followers on Twitter or Instagram, right? Or if you're old, Facebook. And of course, employee score incentives also can skew things if you're incenting people based on the results. My favorite example here is the auto industry. The auto industry has screwed this up so monumentally, it's phenomenal. I mean, anyone here who's bought a car in the last 10 or 20 years, I'm sure you've had your sales rep in the process at some point tell you, I need you to give me a 5, or I need you to give me an extremely satisfied. And if you can't do that, tell me now what I can do to make sure that you can, right? They almost beg you to give them a certain score, and they tell you exactly what they want you to put on that score, that the third party is going to come and anonymously get from you. It's because the dealerships have put such a high incentive rate against those scores that that's the employee behavior. So you have to be really careful how we incent our employees, because it will adjust their behavior, whether we know it or not. There's also an operational truth, and that is that those frontline employees are at the heart of your customer experience. And then this is where the debate starts happening. Well, what about the cashierless location? Or what about where the people are paying without talking to them? And my response is always, yeah, well, who put the stuff on the shelf and made it look good? And who made sure the prices were there? And who made sure the floor was clean? Right? I mean, your employees are the heart of the experience. even as it's evolving and changing, right? That's not really changing. Therefore, if you're going to improve your customer experience, you have to involve those frontline employees. They have to be engaged. They have to be with you on the journey, right? So how do you augment customer feedback with other data around that in-person experience, right, involving your employees? Today, we have all that customer feedback. We need to add to that feedback about our operations and our customers, because we need to start figuring out, right, are our standards being followed, of course, but are they aligned with our customers? The standards that we track and follow and request, are they the ones that customers want? Are they meaningful? Do they matter? Right? Or are they just our standards? Are they not the customer standards? Right? So how do you answer these questions? Well, in our world, the customer experience and operational measurement world, we look at three nouns. We look at feedback, we look at overt, and we look at covert. Okay? I'll explain real quick just to make sure we're all using the same language. Feedback is the things I just talked about, which is the surveys, the call center data, the social media data, solicited, unsolicited, it's just coming at you, right? Overt is also often called an audit. They may be announced, people know you're coming. They may be unannounced, surprise, I'm here, right? They may be done by a third party, they may be done internally, but basically they're used to collect detailed operational information you couldn't get any other way. For example, checking all the expiry dates on the sandwiches or the milk. You sort of, it can be a little suspicious if your manager is watching somebody rifle through the cooler. So those are typically done in overt. They're very good for getting detail and quantity. Then you've got covert, often called the mystery shop. This is where a person goes in, they're not identified, nobody knows who they are, they're supposed to come and go without ever being known they were there, right, as a regular individual. And it's probably the only way to accurately measure employee adherence to customer service standards. Because if your employees aren't adjusting their standards to be what you want them to be when they know somebody's in the store, we probably have deeper operational issues. So I put a stool in the middle of these three, overt, covert, and feedback, because I look at these programs as legs of a stool. And stools need a certain number of legs to be stable. And as you start removing legs, they start to get unstable. And you can balance them, sure, right? But they're not as functional. They can fall over on you, right? Leave them unattended and you got a real problem. Greatest example that I use here is I just use a simple one around washrooms. Imagine for a second that you've got your customer feedback has come in and it has told you that your customers feel your washrooms are not clean enough. And we can't argue with the data. The data is unequivocally true. 100% your customers feel your washrooms are not clean enough. So you're running the operations for your banner. What do you go do? When I ask that question, the most common response that I get, and I don't know if it was just in your head right now, is go tell them to clean the washrooms, right? Sounds easy enough. The problem is, if that's the only information you have, you might actually be making your customer experience in your locations worse. So how is it possible that you go tell people to clean washrooms and your experience gets worse? Well, that's easy. What if your employees were doing exactly what you told them to do already? What if they were following your standards? What if they were doing everything you requested of them, doing all the checklists, all the right things, and now you come and tell them that they're not doing a good job and they need to do a better job? I'm not sure I would love to be an employee in that situation. I'm going to maybe a little unhappy, I want to use disgruntled, but maybe not as happy as I was for sure. That's not going to help your customer experience. That's going to hurt your customer experience. The answer might be in capital improvements. The answer might be in a change in standards or process or procedure that then needs to be rolled out through the organization. But if you don't understand whether or not a current standard is being followed the way you want it to be followed, it's very difficult to make a really good decision at the top of the company in terms of should we do this or should we do that? Is it a simple execution problem that we need to get on top of, or do we need to make structural changes throughout the organization to get to what our customers are actually looking for from us? And you also find sometimes customers don't care about the things you care about, and you're spending time on the wrong things. And that's why we always talk about getting more than one data point. And this is going to become really important as experiences start to evolve and change and grow, and you start to not just have one type of interaction to measure, right? As you start to have 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 different types of customer interactions, but with the same brand promise that your customers expect from you. So that's my challenge to everybody, is as the world shifts and changes and as your customers expect more and different and new, that we need to keep up. and that we need to make sure that we're measuring and that we're making the right decisions. With that, I'm going to switch gears and talk about studies a little bit. So as some of you who were here last year know, we did a few studies, one of which was a study of mobile application use. So we measured actual applications created by the banner, so not third-party applications, but applications of the company themselves to order and order ahead for food and have it purchased and pick it up. We looked at ease, execution, and the experience itself. Overall, QSR did better than the petro-convenience industry. We just did 4 of each. There was one petro-convenience banner who was in the middle of the QSR, and the other 3 were below QSR. So QSR was doing better from a mobile application execution standpoint. When we compare that to last year, you can see that QSR actually improved a little bit, and that on the CSP side, we got a little bit worse. However, that's partly because we added a 4th banner and they didn't do so well to even it out, but nonetheless, the Net Promoter Score shows the same information. Net Promoter Score, for those of you who don't know, is a 10-point scale, 0 to 10. 9s and 10s are considered to be promoters, 6 and below are detractors, 7 and 8s are neutral. And it's a very simple, would you recommend this store to others question. And you can see that the QSR channel, the promoters increased to almost 70%. Their detractors significantly decreased over the last year. And there was a slight decrease in the petro-convenience and a decrease in the detractors. So you can see that they've done a little bit, they're getting on that path a little bit faster from the apps that we looked at. So if you do have your own app, I would encourage you to measure and benchmark and look and see whether or not that experience is the same for your customers as it is when they come and see you. We did the same thing with third-party delivery. We took a look again at ease, execution, and the overall experience. And third-party delivery, of course, being just that. People get it delivered, but not by the brand or the banner, by one of the third-party companies. We measured DoorDash, Skip the Dishes, and Uber Eats specifically. And you can see it's interesting. Skip the Dishes and DoorDash actually did better when you used their website than you used their app. Whereas where Uber shines is on the app side of things, when you use the app, which makes sense when you think about the fact that their origins are as a company using an app to order cars. So they're probably really good at apps. You know, I'd probably tell Uber you might want to work on your website a little bit. But in general, you're seeing the trend. If you look at 2018 versus 2019, the important thing to note is that the promoters have gone up in every single case and detractors have gone down in every single case, which means that this is a focus, right? Integrating this into the overall experience, people are focused on. People are trying to get better at it because it's important that it does get better. Because if you look, promoters are still only at 50% on 2 of them. Actually, Skip Dishes did very well at 80 with this study, but it's not high numbers, but they are improving. They are focused against them. I also want to talk briefly about the CSR and QSR from a mystery shop standpoint. As part of the award that we give out, one of the audits that we do is a mystery shop. Now, mystery shops, because no one knows we're there, right? I can do anybody I want. So we did 11 QSR chains as well as the 10 CSP study participants, right? Visited them all during the same time period. They're all covert visits, and we've done it now for 3 years, so we're actually starting to get a little bit of a trend on it from a QSR standpoint. These are the brands that we evaluated. I'm not going to read them all, but I think there's probably at least 2 or 3 logos up there that you recognize. You know, we're doing some pretty big names from a QSR standpoint. And the overall scores, you can see there's a bit of a trend line there. And what's interesting is that the top score is a convenience chain, but the next 5 are from the QSR industry. But 4 out of the bottom 5 are also from the QSR industry. QSR owns the best in class, and they own the worst in class, okay? And we kind of sit in the middle from a petro-convenience standpoint. What that means from a trend data standpoint is that you're seeing the QSR chains have actually increased every year. So they're actually getting better every year. And we've been measuring the same chains every year, so that's a real improvement. You have to be a little bit careful on the pure trend data on the convenience side because we do change the Outlook participants a little bit every year. So some of the variation has to do with participant change. But the gap is narrowing based on QSR improving. And obviously, we're seeing, you know, the highs and the lows. So I would challenge anybody here that's looking to do benchmarking and getting more into food service that benchmark against best in class. Don't benchmark against the average, because the best in class is far different than the average when you look at your food service competitors. We also did a study around vaping. I'm sure that none of you in the convenience space have had any discussions around e-cigarettes over the last 12 months. It probably hasn't come up. But just in case one or two of you are interested in it, there is some interesting discussion around whether it's a youth crisis or not, right? But one thing's true. Younger children have a higher propensity to use e-cigarettes than they do cigarettes. Almost 3 times as much in grade 8, over twice as much in grade 10. Right? So that's true. Boys are twice as likely to use e-cigarettes as girls. So there are definitely some things to worry about. Society has a concern, for sure. We're hearing about it. Lord knows the FDA is definitely, right now, any audits they're doing out there, I'm sure they're no longer checking your alcohol and your tobacco, right? They're just checking vaping and e-cigarettes, because the usage is up on the data over 2018 in middle schools, in high schools. There's over 3.5 million people doing it. It's become a pretty big topic in society right now. So we went out, we said, let's take a look and let's see how the industry's doing. Because, from a responsible retail standpoint, of course, people expect that but at least we're not putting it in the hands of the youth in the petro-convenience space. So nobody knew we were doing this. It wasn't any open study. We did kind of a behind-the-scenes study on this. We shot people between the ages of 18 and 25, and we just simply asked them to go and try to buy an e-cigarette product without showing ID. It was that simple as far as what we did. Now, some people are like, yeah, but at 18 in some places, or 19 or 20 or 20, it's legal to buy it. Correct. However, most responsible retailers have signs up and have policies that say, we ID everyone who's over 30, 35, 40. In the case of e-cigarettes, sometimes it's we ID everyone, period, before you want to buy one. Some people have electronic scanning and where they take the driver's license. So, there is a standard that isn't, we're going to make our employees figure out whether you're 18 or 19 or 20 or 21. There is a higher standard. So we used 18 to 25 to be somewhat conservative and just to kind of check in terms of how we're doing against standards. Overall, almost 89% of the C-stores we looked at, the 6 banners that we looked at, we're asking for ID. That's the good news. It's broken up a little bit in that one banner was at 100%. Every single time, we were always asked for ID or we weren't sold the product. And by the way, to make this a little bit challenging, our people were instructed, if they do not ask for ID, of course you buy it. If they ask for ID, you say, oh, I didn't bring it. Come on, like obviously I'm old enough, can I have it, right? And 100% of the time, they said, no, we don't want the sale. Walk away, go get your ID, right? Which is what's supposed to happen. The banner with 95% actually has signs up in their store that say, we ID every e-cigarette purchase. So they're missed at 1 out of 20 times in terms of their own standards. And everyone else is a little over 80, which means 2 out of 10 people are still being sold without being asked for ID. But where it gets a little bit, you start to see why the FDA and people are getting upset, is independent convenience is only checking for ID in this situation 2/3 of the time, right? Which is very different than the chains. When you compare it to industries, right, chain stores actually did the best. Dropped down a little bit when we did the mass merch, a little bit less for grocery, but independent convenience still sets the low watermark in terms of taking the sale versus pushing for the ID. So this is merely informational since it's topical. Now I want to talk a little bit about the Intouch Award and CSP magazine that we do for the Customer Experience of 2019. The format this year was we maintained the exact same overt audit that we did last year and previous year before that. We did the exact same customer service focused mystery shop. And this year the weighting was 60% on the overt audit because it has more data points, and it's 40% on the customer service side from the weighting standpoint for the award. I'm not going to read everything up there, but from the overt audit, we do 28 different observation points, as you can see, and they cover everything from the forecourt to the pumps. On the mystery shop side, we have 11 scored data points, which cover a little bit of interior exterior timing, but really mostly they're focused on the customer service element, most of the data points. The brands this year, we have 4 that came back from last year, Quick Trip with a Q, Maverick, Rudders, and True North were the 4 that returned that were in the study last year. Then we added 6 new ones: Speedway, United Pacific, Highs, Extra Mile, Noria, Energy, and End Market all joined this year. That created the 10 banners that we looked at. Quick learning, I like to always point out what we learned from customer engagement, from a Net Promoter Score standpoint, from a key driver analysis. And the top thing that came out is the thing that always comes up, and it's that concept of the customer, the cashier, being courteous. And that's what we talked about earlier. That's the friendly, the smiling, the parting remark, the showing appreciation for the business. Those things always come up. They're always important in terms of Net Promoter Scores and customer satisfaction. The second one, however, is new. This is the first time we've actually had the variety of products being sold show up in the key driver analysis as that important. I would hypothesize it's starting to come into play because the data Donna showed yesterday said that 75% of locations have been built in the last 10 years. Well, that means consumers are starting to get educated that they can expect more in and from a convenience store. And so they're starting to notice if they do have that variety or they don't. But it's starting to impact their decision to revisit and recommend. And that's new. So that's an interesting data point I want to make sure we point out. And the third one, of course, is the general appearance of the interior, which again is usually there. We all know this. You can't have really happy, appreciative employees and a terrible, crappy looking store. You're not gonna get it. You also can't have a beautiful store full of clean things and gorgeous shiny knobs and a really grumpy employee and have customer satisfaction and repeat business. You need to have both. And that's why we actually do the mystery shop and the overt audit and combine them for the award. Because if you're not working both at some level, you're going to have problems. Brand highlights from this year. Highs had the highest audit score in general for the overall overt audit. They had 100% on the coffee section, the exterior, and the interior sections. Quick Trip had the highest overall mystery shopping score in the study. And then Extra Mile and Quick Trip both had 100% on the employee sections this year. True North had the highest sandwich score and dairy cooler score, which are sort of the food service type metrics. So that was pretty cool to have them both with one person. And Noria had 100% on the exterior section. So there were some pretty cool scores. And then Quick Trip actually had an 88% Net Promoter Score. That's a very good score. You saw earlier the general scores that we were seeing when we were showing Net Promoter Scores. None of them were that high. So that was a really cool score. So with that, I'm going to flip over to this slide here. And it's a little anticlimactic every year when I get to see in the winner is because it's on the cover of the magazines on the table. And the article was published. So I think we all know who the winner is. But I want to mention a couple of things about the winner first. Earlier I talked about a slide where I said there was one petro-convenience chain that was the best in the mystery shop, and then it was 5 QSRs. Well, that chain that was the best in that overall mystery shop of those 21 banners was this same company, right? When I put up the vaping study, and I said there was one banner that asked for ID 100% of the time, it was this same banner. They effectively have run the table on every study that we've done over the last few months in terms of execution. And so with that, it's not really a surprise that they're winning the Customer Experience Award this year. So with that, I want to ask Stuart Sullivan, Vice President and CFO for Quick Trip, to come on up and accept the award. Thank you, Stuart. And I went through a lot of things very quickly. I didn't get into a lot of detail because my experience with data and numbers and stuff is most people don't want the detail. They only want to get the gist. But if anybody does want more information, most of the people who are in the study have received detailed data on their own individual banners. But if anyone wants more information, please feel free to contact me directly. My information's on the screen. I think I'm probably in the book as well. And with that, I will say, have a great conference.